You've tuned into local radio 91.3 Keppel FM. Thanks for joining us on Coffee and a Chat, where we focus on the Cap Coast community with a look at who we are, what we do, and what matters to us. I'm your host, Melinda. You can tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. or catch a repeat at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. Today we'll start off by looking at the position that Education Queensland takes on new technologies such as GenAI, and for much of this I'll be quoting directly from their website. The department explains that, and quote, generative artificial intelligence uses data it was trained on to generate new content such as text, images, audio and video that resembles what humans can produce. It's effective at recognising patterns in video, audio, text or images and emulating them when tasked with producing something. And then we've got, and this is a quote again, Ed Queensland acknowledges that today's students need to be prepared for a more diverse and global world and commits to embedding future-focused learning practices. Then it goes on to say, we aim to leverage innovations to connect young people to learning in ways that inspire them and prepare them. The site talks about the Australian government's position as well when it says, education ministers from all Australian states and territories have agreed that responding to the risks and harnessing opportunities from GenAI technologies is a national education priority. And as recently as December 2023, an Australian framework was released. The Australian Framework for Generative Artificial Intelligence in Schools, and it aims to provide guidance on the ethical and safe use of GenAI in schools in ways that benefit students, schools and society. The framework is designed to help Australian school communities support three overarching goals, which are education outcomes, ethical practices, and equity and inclusion. There's also a section where they look at ways in which teachers may use the technology, and these include creating and customising content, assisting with admin tasks, and improving operational efficiencies, designing formative assessments, data analysis, and providing feedback. And the Ed Queensland site also offers a series of webinars that parents can register for. They're aimed at helping parents to protect their children online and to look at ways parents can help set their child up for success online. Upcoming sessions include Wellbeing and Digital Technologies and Setting Your Child Up for Success Online. They're both in May and there are several later in the year as well. To learn more about those, probably the easiest way is to Google using 3 words, eSafety Parents Webinars, and that should get you there. You're listening to Coffee and a Chat on 91.3 Keppel FM. Today I'm very pleased to be back with Associate Professor in Information and Communication Technology at CQU, Michael Cowling. And also today, Associate Professor Linda Pfeiffer will be joining us, and we'll be talking about the use of AI in secondary education. Welcome Linda, welcome Michael, and thank you so much for joining me today to chat over Zoom. And Linda, I'll direct the first question your way. Could you tell us what's happening with AI and GenAI in schools at the moment?
I can see that AI has large impacts on the humanities, including English in secondary schools, because what's happening with things like ChatGPT is that secondary school students are using it to generate essays or assignments. And I think for that reason, AI is being portrayed as a negative tool in secondary schools, and students and teachers are afraid of it. And we don't want to ban it because it is a tool that is useful. But I think what's happening is that school students are using it mainly more in generating content in the form of essays and written assessment tasks.
If students are using it to write essays and assessment tasks, is that seen as much of a problem, do you think?
I think it is a problem that schools aren't prepared for. And I think, there's lots of issues with this. It's not a new technology, but the new use of this technology is posing a lot of issues in education.
Right, okay. I saw on the internet, Mike, that you were involved in a presentation, a conference paper. It was about the use of AI in language teaching.
So casting back on this idea that generative AI and ChatGPT can be used for good as well as bad, right?
Sure.
I think it would be fair to say that in the last 24 months, people have been in panic mode, at least at the very beginning, right? It's very much about, oh, this is going to be used by students for cheating and, oh my goodness, academic assessment and academic integrity is at risk, right? The idea is, well, wait, maybe this tool can be used for positive things as well. So as we said earlier, it's a great conversational tool, and it's the kind of tool that you can have conversations with and that you can give follow-up questions to. And so if you're a student that is learning English as your second language and you want somebody to talk to, then ChatGPT could be a really, really great tool for students to talk to and communicate with and have conversations with. And the fact that some of the stuff that it's saying is not true, it's probably not as big a deal when what you're interested in is that conversational approach.
Ah, interesting. Linda, could you tell us a bit about what's happening in STEM subjects in schools at the moment? And for our listeners, STEM, of course, is science, technology, engineering and mathematics.
AI does have an impact on STEM subjects, particularly design and technology, where it can be used as a tool to save time and create different learning experiences, being used in coding and writing script in the technology subjects, not so much in the sciences where assessment tasks and things for students are more practical based.
Okay, so my daughter's a secondary mathematics teacher. She's sort of teaching year 11, 12 maths, and she's saying that she's used GPT, she's used generative AI, but it's actually not very good at solving equations a lot of the time. Can you tell us anything about that?
Your daughter who's typing in math problems or giving it difficult math problems, what she's getting in response, I would imagine, is what it thinks the most likely answer is to that math problem based on all of the other people that have tried to solve that math problem out there in the world in the past, out there on the web, right? And for standardized math problems, it's very likely that you're going to get something that is probably correct. But things that are a little bit more complicated, a little bit more difficult, a little bit more unique, the machine, the AI, doesn't have a mechanism to come up with something unique or different or novel, right? It's just remixing the stuff that's already out there in the world. And so if the answer's out there in the world and that answer looks like it's the most likely answer, it'll give it to you. If it isn't, well, then it won't, and you get the wrong answer. There's no expert inside of the ChatGPT system doing the actual evaluation. The best you can do is kind of remix all of the answers that it's got. And so to Linda's point about science, technology, engineering, and math, I've heard people in the past say that the mathematicians are all laughing at the English teachers, I think, at this point, because they've had to deal with technology moving into their space for a long time, calculators and Microsoft Excel and various other computer-based tools. And now this technology is moving into the English space and causing a disruption there. But it's actually it sort of caused the disruption in math a long time ago.
Interesting point, yeah.
Having said that, it is still making some interesting changes. Computer programming is one spot where it's doing some interesting stuff because it can generate computer code if you ask it to. But based on the conversation that we just had, what's the likelihood that that computer code actually does what you want it to do? Well, maybe 70%.
So it seems that GenAI is quite fallible at the moment. We'll be back with Linda and Michael after a break.
Hi, I'm Bill Gannon and I love listening to Keppel FM 91.3, our voice on the Capricorn Coast.
True blood.
Last week, Michael was telling us about a GenAI tool called Tay, T-A-Y, that got its own Twitter account and started interacting with the public. And Tay was responding to the input it had been receiving from the public, and within 24 hours, it had become quite racist and quite misogynistic. Its account was soon closed and Microsoft went back to the lab to see how they could manage issues like these. Linda, I know that there was a trial of a tool called EdChat in South Australian schools, and I know that it was a finite trial. It ran in 8 schools for a period of 8 weeks. Can you tell us anything about the trial, anything about its findings?
Yeah, so what they did is wrote their own little chatbot called EdChat, and they trialled it in schools, and they found that there was a misconception before the trial that the students thought whatever comes out of the GenAI, tool is correct. The use of this tool has made the students realise that, so it's not necessarily accurate, it's not reputable sources, and it has shown the students how you can use it as a tool, but you can't use it to generate something that you can then submit.
Right, okay, so it can be a learning tool. Well, that's quite interesting then, that students quickly realised that it doesn't always produce reliable results. So can you tell us why did the Education Department in South Australia create their own tool rather than use an existing one like ChatGPT?
I think that would come down to a lot of the security issues that you would have being in an education department. So, we already have a lot of blocks on different parts of the internet that aren't appropriate for school students. So it was the only way that they could create something and use it as a trial in schools that would have had to have passed ethics and been able to be safe and useful for the students. So they worked in partnership with Microsoft to develop that program.
So I'd like to ask also, I've read something about the use of VR, or virtual reality headsets and AI. Mike, is that your area?
It is, but I'm not sure that I can give you a lot of colour. They're quite distinct technologies. So virtual reality or augmented reality or extended reality is about visualising things, right? It's about visualising digital objects in a physical space or going into an entirely virtual digital world. Artificial intelligence is about predicting, forecasting, recognizing, and also generating content as well. I can see how those things would eventually cross over in some way. And I could see how, for example, you might enter into a VR world to interact with a virtual avatar that is powered by some sort of artificial intelligence. But I think in a lot of ways they're quite separate technologies, although they often get lumped together in sort of the innovative technology basket.
We'll take a short break, and when we get back, we'll learn about how teachers are using GenAI in admin-type applications, such as preparing lessons or maybe marking students' work. You're listening to Coffee and a Chat on 91.3 Keppel FM. My name's Melinda. ChatGPT became widely available in 2022, and people in the education field quickly realised that it could be used for cheating, but also that it was probably here to stay, really couldn't be ignored. So educators needed to think about the positives and the negative aspects of the technology with a view to considering how it could be used in the classroom and in other ways. And you've both alluded to the idea that people were perhaps initially fearful or scared of it, but that they also realised that it could be utilised positively. By the end of 2023, both the Australian and Queensland governments had produced documents and frameworks on how the new tools could be managed to assist teachers and to benefit students, while locking in safety features to protect children and ensure integrity. So, though it's still early days, it's a rapidly developing field. We've looked at how it's being used in the classroom at the moment, but what do we know about how teachers are using GenAI in their admin work? In work such as assessing students, preparing lessons, gathering information, and so on.
Teachers would be using it to find information and resources. When we suddenly had access to information instantly online, it was overwhelming. And I think for teachers in today's society, there is a huge amount of information available at your fingertips. So using AI to, troll through information, find appropriate resources that can assist you with your teaching is absolute game changer. as long as the teachers are educated and aware that what they're looking for, what ChatGPT or any AI tool provides to them may or may not be accurate, may or may not be a reputable source. So they would need to use their judgment in that. But I think it's a great tool for finding resources and seeing what's available. I think it would save a lot of time.
Michael?
What we were saying before about what's happening in South Australia, I think that's what people are starting to realise with these tools. Yes, some of those old-fashioned assessments where we ask students to write 1,500 words on a topic in a very definitional way, we might not be able to do those so effectively anymore. But if we can come up with new assessments that actually involve saying, well, have a conversation with the machine and tell me what it said, maybe evaluate the output of what it's actually provided to you, well, then we can start to see some value in this tool as a positive way to change our assessment as opposed to a negative.
Right, and it could also be a way to demonstrate critical thinking, perhaps on behalf of the student in the particular questions that they ask.
That's exactly right, because one thing that ChatGPT and generative AI is not particularly good at is evaluation and synthesis, which you understand. Once you understand how the tool works, you understand why it's not very good at evaluation and synthesis. Right. So it can't do critical thinking.
So it then becomes a very useful tool for students once they realise that it's not just the way to the answer. It's actually the process of evaluating it. Right, okay. And what about the idea that teachers might be using AI in order to assess the student? So the student has some multiple choice, true, false type questions, rather than the teacher going through 100 students worth of these assessments, the AI can just spit out the scores.
I would be hesitant to feed true-false questions or fill-in-the-blank questions into ChatGPT, because as we've discussed previously, you just can't trust what it's telling you. Even though it's marking things correct or incorrect, it's not a truth engine, right? But what it is really good at is summarizing and providing feedback and maybe spending a little bit more time on finessing the words. That's really what it does for us, right?
Right. I do know that it's being used in language teaching, particularly in high-stakes tests where students from, say, India want to move to Australia. So they've got to pass particular tests. And in order to do that, they've got to write practice essays. And those practice essays, which used to be scored and commented upon by teachers, can now be essentially commented on by AI. The AI can actually assess the essay against set criteria, and those essay questions do have set criteria. So the AI can give feedback, can give a score, and it's used in the context of practice tests.
So I think you've nailed the difference there. So yes, I can imagine a situation where you say, here's a 1,500 word essay from a student. Here's the rubric that we're using to mark that essay. Could you please give me 200 words of feedback for that student? And it would spit out 200 words that would be really nice. Now, of course, as a teacher, you should read those 200 words and make sure that what it's saying about the student's grammar and spelling and sentence structure is actually correct, right? See what we said previously about hallucination. But as long as you're willing to evaluate it, you're saving yourself a lot of time, because it would take you longer to write those 200 words than it does to get the machine to start, and then you just basically edit those words. And so we're doing that a lot, and we're actually doing that in higher education at the moment. Down at the University of Sydney, they have a great tool that does this. It's called Cognito, that actually will generate this type of feedback. I've got something else for you there on that if you're interested. Something that come out recently is that OpenAI have made the technology that they use to build their ChatGPT tool available to people to apply to their own particular data set. So if you imagine that ChatGPT is based on the entirety of the internet, right? It goes out and it looks at all of the content that it can find and feeds it all in to the ChatGPT tool. Then there's also the ability to build a GPT tool. So take away the word chat, just a GPT tool that is based on your own corpus of data. The downside is that you're feeding it a limited amount of data. And so the kinds of things it can say to you is quite limited. But because you're controlling the data that you feed into it, you can also control the hallucinations. And so as we move forward, I would not be surprised to see more schools and more departments of education and various other government organisations or commercial organisations build their own bespoke GPTs with just the data that they want to feed into it, because that allows them to control the hallucinations and what the machine actually says.
Okay, interesting. I love that term, hallucination. It's great. Okay, a few quick questions just before we finish then. So one question is, some people are talking about the idea that AI could solve the problem of teacher shortages. Any comments on that one?
It's a blended classroom approach. So at university, everyone studies online and some face-to-face. We did it in COVID. I think if we had a blended approach to secondary education, where appropriate, so some students can study at home, they're disciplined, they have the right family situation, they can be adequately supervised. If some of those kids went to school a couple of days a week instead of 5, you could free up the teachers because they could do some online teaching from the school, they could have larger class sizes, etc., etc. So I do think there is definitely potential to create much better education system. People will want to become teachers, will solve the teacher shortage, and have the profession valued as the way it should be.
Michael, do you have any comments on that one?
If I had $1 for every time that a school teacher had asked me, is the robot going to steal my job, I would be able to take 6 months off work. Look, I think ultimately, I'm biased because I'm a university professor and I also do not want the robot to take my job. But I genuinely think, even though I'm a technology apologist, I can say with some confidence that it's going to be a significant amount of time before this AI can entirely replace teachers. Having said that, I think the AI can be a good teaching assistant, and I think it can help us to do some things like providing feedback more effectively, helping students with some personalized learning and some things that they need, as long as they can evaluate the output, in a situation where that then frees up the teacher's time so that the teacher is able to do something else. So I don't think it's a quick fix. I think the government would love us to say, in 12 months, this will solve the teacher shortage problem. I think that's not necessarily true, but I do think over time, it can improve quality of life and quality of education by providing that teacher assistance functionality that then frees the teacher up to do higher level work.
Okay. Thank you both very much for your time today. It's been a fascinating discussion and very much appreciate your input. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Thanks, Melinda.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Coffee and a Chat on 91.3 Keppel FM. Thanks for tuning in today. You'll find Coffee and a Chat right here every Monday at 10 a.m. and repeated on Wednesday at 10 a.m.